How come you guys didn't check on me to not record? All right, we're recording now. I'm going to fly through this again, all right, just in terms of the breakdown. So I apologize for repeating myself. We're extending the deadline because of expectations changing. How are expectations changing? Look at number 3. I told you guys previously, you will be required to present this. So after it's all said and done, you will be presenting this. You'll put on a shirt and tie. You'll sit at a chair or a stand in front of a screen or a laptop, and you will have a script, and you will pitch your companies to either merge or one of them to buy the other. Well, what does that mean? We're planning to tag those businesses on social media so they can see it. Well, again, why is that important? For me, that's important because I think these videos are going to show your proof that you guys are not normal people and that you have value you can add to any institution, any internship. This link can be used to provide to hiring managers, internship managers, universities, because it shows you understand the economics behind, one, mergers and acquisitions, the finances behind the balance sheet, and the data-driven process of deciding if a merger or acquisition works. Now, in order to make sure it works, as we just said previously, all of your statements have to be fact-based, rooted in data. So what does that mean? If we look at the assignment, okay, part 2 was about cash, debt, or equity. Well, that's not fact-based in terms of data we're looking for. These are the numbers and the finances we already discussed from the balance sheet. So let's look at number 3. Consumers are not happy. Provide 3 reasons this would be beneficial to the companies from the view of a consumer. This has to be data-driven, right? Not an opinion on why it's good, but numbers on the reason it would work. So somebody give me your merger or acquisition. Let me give you an example of how data would drive this thought. Hello? Okay, Samsung merging with Microsoft, that would probably never be allowed, right? That merger would be so blocked by anyone in the world because those are already 2 of the largest players in hardware and software globally. That's like the people who told me Facebook and Google or Amazon and Microsoft. That's not possible. All right, somebody give me something else. How about we do anyone? Okay, thank you, James. Pepsi acquires Kellogg's. Okay, so the first thing you have to argue is the data for why for the consumer, right? Well, Pepsi has, you know, only 10% of sales coming from snacks. Kellogg's has 90% of it coming from snacks or cereals. Pepsi would be able to decrease costs of production, which can be passed on to the consumer. You have to find some data on that, but that can be an argument that you make. Okay, you would probably be able to argue maybe hiring. Again, data based on office locations, data based on new products and research teams. Okay, if you can find comparisons, what does Kellogg's currently offer? What does Pepsi not offer? Maybe you Maybe your data is a list of the top 5 products that sell for each business. And if there's very little overlap, well, maybe it makes sense for Pepsi. And if Pepsi has more partnerships, perhaps Pepsi would be able to sneak those Kellogg's products into their partnership locations. Right? So AMC movie theaters are partnered with Pepsi for all their soda and beverages. Well, maybe that partnership with AMC could get Kellogg Nutri-Grain bars in there. Or maybe Kellogg's has deals with the school systems that helps them get Pepsi soda or juices into those school systems. Okay? But you would have to find some actual real evidence, whether it's fact, data in terms of percentages, or actual number figures. You can't just say that, well, this would work because, or we think that. All right? There has to be some real evidence there. If you drop down to the Department of Justice, this one's probably a little bit harder. The Department of Justice's job, did anybody start this one yet? Can you tell me what you think the DOJ's job is? What is the Department of Justice's job? It's not to increase competition, but it's not to allow monopolies. It's to allow competition to exist. So their job isn't to increase competition. Their job is to allow competition to exist and not to hurt competition. Okay? So data on this. Well, this is going to be a little bit trickier then. Because this has to be percentages, right? Would you allow Pepsi to acquire Kellogg's? What is the size of both companies? What is the competition that exists between the companies and other businesses? You know, Pepsi represents 40% of all soda and snack sales. Okay. Kellogg's represents 10% of all soda and snack sales. Coca-Cola Company represents 30%. And then every other business is only 1%. Well, Pepsi can't really acquire Kellogg's then, if those are the data, if that's the data. Because then Pepsi all of a sudden acquired the 3rd largest snack business. So Pepsi's first, Coca-Cola's second, Kellogg's is 3rd. You can't let the first buy the 3rd. You can let the 3rd buy the 4th, the 3rd buy the 5th. The 1st and 2nd, you cannot let them buy someone, right? So you'd have to find data on what are the largest businesses. That's an example. Okay? And then investors hear about your plans. And again, it can't be, you can have an opinion, but your opinion is from somewhere. So if we go back to Tyler, Tyler's opinion came from somewhere. That people need to limit going outside. That opinion is because he thinks people are not going to go to the doctor. Well, if they're not going to go to the doctor, how would they get to see a doctor? Well, telehealth. Okay, so you have a data point about that, people not going outside. It can't just be the opinion that people are limiting going outside. Right? You have to give a number attached to it. And then how's that number relate to the business that's being acquired or acquiring? So again, so it almost seems like if I look at Tyler's, this is for the Department of Justice. That's why you can't block this thing. But the problem here is None of this talks about the Department of Justice. This is about the consumer. All of this is about the consumer. So this is not satisfying the Department of Justice piece. There's no data here, so he's going to have to rework this anyway. But this doesn't even address competition. This doesn't even address pricing power. Okay? And you have to be careful. This acquisition or merger cannot just be about the coronavirus. Because when this virus is all said and done, let's say maybe a year or a year and a half, and things get back to 90% normal, what are you going to tell me, that this acquisition was a bad idea a year and a half later? No, you have to make the argument that this is important for the rest of Amazon's life. That this is important for all of Amazon forever. For Amazon to get into healthcare. For whatever they're trying to do. That's why this is important. The DOJ is going to try to tell you that you can't buy them. Your job is to tell them why you should be allowed to. All right? There's, 15 other telehealth companies. Teladoc is the same size as 12 other telehealth companies. Good. That's the first reason it doesn't hurt competition. You gave me a data point on the number of businesses, and you proved to me there's like 10 other businesses that do this. Great. That's one. Where's number two? Well, it doesn't make Amazon have a monopoly. Because there are other competitors, and because Teladoc is so small, it won't necessarily give Amazon pricing power because of all the other competitors. So even though Amazon is getting larger as a business, Amazon is worth this much in revenue, now it's going to get this much, or this is the market cap, now this is the market cap. Yes, they're going to have exposure to the healthcare system. However, they are not removing competition. And then find a third one. Okay? So, but again, it's database. It's not just, hey, I have this thought in my head and this is why they should buy it. If you have the thought, find the numbers, percentages, charts, or graphs that back up your thought. If that makes sense, type a number 1 in the box. Now, I know that means some of you that already did this are going to have to go back and find the data. Well, that's why I'm giving you 3 more days. That's why I'm giving you 3 more days. Because if I can get you, if you have your concrete thoughts, just find the data that supports your thought. Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time, but I think 3 days is good enough. If we move this to May 7th, because your thoughts came from somewhere. Find the data of that somewhere. Does this make sense so far? Try to make it more professional. When you do the cover page, make sure you use the Amazon logo, the Teladoc logo, because, again, you're going to be presenting this next week, right? So if this is now due next Thursday, the following Monday is when we're going to start figuring out, when is your pitch due? So if this is due next Thursday, maybe your pitch is due the following Friday. That gives you 8 days to just turn your slides into a script, learn your script, and deliver your slides. 5 minutes, in and out, done and done. Record it as many times as you want. I don't care. Okay, so are we good here so far? This is just clarification of making things prettier and professional. All right. Now let's get to, I know I didn't have any of you guys show your stuff yet, but I want to get to the balance sheet again because I'm waiting on someone to see if they can get me information on what happens to stockholders' equity during a merger or acquisition. I'm waiting on someone in the industry. I did a little bit of Google searching. I got some differing points of view. So I'm not trying to do this from the top of my head and give you wrong information that I get offline. Okay? What I'm trying to do is get an industry professional to give me that information. Clearly, that's not working yet. As soon as I get that information, I'm hoping today, I can share it tomorrow. However, that shouldn't stop you yet because you can still combine all of their assets and liabilities, the cost of the acquisition, and develop the new balance sheet. Just don't do the stockholders' equity yet. Everything else you definitely can do. Okay? If you can do everything else, then I think you can do almost the whole balance sheet. Kind of important, right? And then I'm hoping by tomorrow I can get you some insight on stockholders' equity. The one thing I want in your slides, though, and in this chart, is the actual cost of the acquisition. So, just so it's on the slide and on the sheet so it's easier to see. So, right? So, $2 billion cost of the acquisition. And then let's go here and we go to his balance sheet, which is here, which he's going to screenshot and add, right? But notice he put it right there in that Google Sheets doc. That's really what I want. I want to be able to see that. So that way when I look through, I see, okay, $6 billion in cash. That means there's $8 more billion to be used. Oh, cool. $5 billion in debt. All right, that means $3 billion in stockholders' equity. And then I can go down to stockholders' equity and check that. Okay. Now, Tyler already did some research and tried to figure out how to do this himself. I'm going to actually check what he has versus what I'm hoping to get told and see if this is what I can showcase with you guys tomorrow. Okay. So, any questions on that? You can still do this entire balance sheet minus stockholders' equity. All right. Ethan had your hand up. Ethan, unmute so we can all hear you. What do you got?
So my question is though that the merger I texted in the chat, you said it was unrealistic. So should I have changed my merger acquisition or spinoff then?
Let's talk after class.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk after class separately. Okay. Anybody else? Questions or comments on what we just discussed so far? Any problems that you guys have experienced with your assignments so far that you'd like to share? Just unmute and fire away.
I had a question.
Okay.
Well, my companies are like Stitch Fix and Amazon, but so because of the issues you said last class about Yahoo Finance, I found Amazon's actual balance sheet, and they have their categories are a little bit more different. So, for instance, I believe that instead of saying, instead of saying short-term investments, they say marketable securities because the numbers add up, but they just have it differently on their actual balance sheet that's on their own investors relations. So I like combine that on my balance sheet. So instead of saying short-term investments, I just put all that into marketable securities. Is that fine?
Okay. Okay, I understand exactly what you're saying. My recommendation and what I have told a few students before, My recommendation, if you've already done that, Leslie, and you're done, you're fine.
Okay.
Don't change it. However, to those of you that are still looking to tweak and work on and are just starting your balance sheet, then I need you to add all of them together. So if they have these 4 for Stitch Fix, right? They have 4 categories. If Amazon has 6 categories, you would then make enough that all of these, maybe combined, they have a total of 8 categories. Keep the 8. I would never, and that's why I have that listed right here. I would never combine the rows recklessly. Like that's not me. What I would do is I would say, hey, Stitch Fix has inventory. Does Amazon have inventory? Yes, they do. Stitch Fix has short-term investments and prepaid expenses. Amazon does not have short-term expenses and prepaid investments, right? Amazon has marketable securities. Well, Stitch Fix does not have marketable securities. What I would have all of those categories, similar to exactly what we did on the balance sheet together here. So notice on this balance sheet, we have zeros. These zeros are areas where all we did was add additional rows. So net receivables, Amazon had. Stitch Fix doesn't, so we just gave Stitch Fix a 0 there. But we didn't move net receivables to another category, because then you're moving money. What if the money doesn't really belong in that category? That's the risk that you have. You're not their forensic accountants, right? You are literally only their investment bank making a recommendation. I would just have all of the categories listed. So if Amazon's got 26 categories total on their balance sheet and Stitch Fix has 36 categories on their balance sheet, I would have all of those rows on the balance sheet. Every single row should be there. Same thing, long-term investments. Amazon doesn't have anything listed for long-term investments, but they do. Amazon has nothing for an operating lease or deferred assets. Stitch Fix does. So notice we added all of these categories. So on this balance sheet, on the new balance sheet, you do have the Stitch Fix prepaid expenses. You do have the Stitch Fix long-term investments. I would not move those numbers. I think that's a scary thing to do. Does that make sense, Leslie?
Yeah. Another question I had was, is it important to have like the net property and equipment, because on both balance sheets, I believe they only have like gross property, I believe. So you can't really do that math where you have like the gross property and
then so your gross. So let me come down and show you. Yahoo Finance shows the gross and then depreciation, which gives you the net.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at Stitch Fix, looking at their balance sheet, they give me, where are we? Liabilities.
Up top.
Where are you looking at?
You're in liabilities. I believe it's up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, under assets. So under assets, look, we have property and equipment, which is probably the gross.
Yeah.
And then the deferred taxes. So this is depreciation.
Okay.
Which means they're doing the gross, then depreciation. And what you have here with Amazon, they're doing the gross, then depreciation equals the net. That will involve you kind of figuring out how you want to structure that yourself a little bit.
Because I'm using Amazon's actual, like their balance sheet that's on their investors relations, and they don't have like a depreciation on it.
But do they have net property on it?
Yeah, they have the net property.
Okay, so they're giving you net
Oh
which
no, not the net. They have like gross. They have the gross.
they have gross without depreciation.
Yeah.
All right, you're gonna have to send me that so I can take a look. That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
All right, so send me that.
My
Leslie,
I linked it.
Serena, you had your hand up. What do you got?
So like for the Stitch Fix one, you had the cost of acquisition under cash and deposits. But for me, when I'm doing Apple on their balance sheet that I'm looking at, they only have $39 billion. But then when I Google it, like just on a Google search, it says they have like 200 something billion dollars.
Yeah, so it might be in other investments,
So
right? If we look at, I actually had Apple open earlier. I closed it. But if we look at Apple, go based off of the balance sheet because they might have in other assets might be that cash, if that makes sense.
because when I do it, when I buy the Nintendo, the like that new Apple, their cash is negative.
Because of how much you spent to purchase them, right?
Yeah,
Okay, how much is it to purchase Nintendo?
it's 52 billion.
52 billion. And if we just look here, again, I'm just gonna look here and see what pops up. And again, I know you're using their actual one. Hey, Yahoo, it's so stupid.
Can I send the actual one, like the link in the chat?
You know what? Yeah, drop the link in the chat. I'll open that because Yahoo Finance is crap. So I'm just gonna close that because they suck. While she's dropping that link, James, you had a question?
Yeah, so I was doing some research on the balance sheet and I found out Pepsi actually doesn't have enough cash to buy Kellogg's by itself. So how should I create a loan plan?
All right, so that's a good idea. That's a good question. So if they don't have enough cash, you only have two options, debt or equity, right? So depending on how much is the purchase for?
I'm gonna say since the market cap for Kellogg's is 22.2 billion, I'm gonna say 24 billion.
I doubt they would take 24 because that's barely, what's that, 10% higher than their actual market cap. You're probably gonna have to offer like 30 or
30?
28.
Right.
You always give them like what their projected growth is. But either way, so you're looking at 30 billion. And what does Pepsi have in cash? Like nothing, right?
They have like nothing.
Okay. So you're looking at predominantly debt and equity. So if you do debt, you can look at what interest rates would be. And again, I'm going to try to find equity tonight. So if you can just decide on debt, then I will try to get that information on equity this evening, so I can teach you guys about the acquisition of stockholders' equity tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
So, long story short, do everything else you can. Merge the balance sheets the best you can without the cost of the acquisition.
Okay.
Know what you think you want to do, and then let's talk more about the actual stockholders' equity piece of that tomorrow. Deal?
Yeah, all right.
All right. Okay, let's get to this, and then William and Frida, I know you got hands up. So we're looking at balance sheet. We're looking at cash. Cash is in thousands or in millions. So cash is in millions, except for numbers of shares, which is in thousands. So we're in millions. So what's 39,000 times a million? Okay, 39 billion. So 39 billion, 67 billion, 20 billion inventory, other current assets. Okay, so if we do the math, I'll do it right now on my phone while we're looking at this. So if we're looking at 39 plus 67 marketable securities. So marketable securities would be like short-term investments you can sell. They're pretty much liquid, you can think of it as. Okay? So think of it as cash because it's pretty liquid. Cash is legit cash, like greenery. But think of marketable securities as liquid enough that you could use it to purchase. So that gives us 106. between cash and marketable securities, other current assets, and then receivables are money you should have coming in, and accounts receivable are money coming in. So if you add that, you're looking at plus 20, plus 18, you're looking at 144 billion there. Okay, because you definitely wouldn't count inventory. I think if you pull from cash and marketable securities, you'd be okay.
So all of them instead of just one column?
Yeah, so I would say, so that's what I would recommend to you, Serena. So that's a good question. So, and this goes for any of you that have marketable securities on your balance sheet. My recommendation to you would be, let's say you had marketable securities. So if you wanted to do how much is your purchase going to be for the acquisition?
Around 52 billion.
52 billion. So maybe you do 20 billion in cash, 20 billion in marketable securities, which means you're probably selling those investments because a security is an investment. So you're selling those investments and using that money that you have, which is now turned into cash. So 20 and 20 gives you 40, which leaves 52 billion. So 12 more, which you can pull out of accounts receivables, which is money coming in.
Okay.
So yeah, you can't pull it all out of cash because cash assumes it's in your bank account right now as cash. So like me, if I go to buy a house, let's say I have $50,000 in my savings account, that's cash. And let's say I have $100,000 in Apple stock, that's my marketable securities. I can still sell Apple stock today and have it in a day to use. So that's what you would do in this situation.
So when they say cash on hand, it's just basically everything on current assets, like other than inventories?
Other than inventory, yeah. Other than inventory. Cash on hand means I can get this money in my hand within hours or a day.
Okay.
This is just breaking it down that Apple literally has $40 billion in a bank account somewhere.
What about the marketable securities for non-current assets? Would that still count as cash somewhat?
That I wouldn't touch. I would only play with non-current assets. I would only play with current assets. I would not touch the non-current assets. Okay, current assets are much easier converted to cash to do something like that. Now, Leslie, you don't need a row with total cash because like this right here is fine. I don't think you have to add anything to Apple right here. I think this is fine. I don't need total cash like Yahoo Finance does. And I leave that to you. As long as it's clear and as long as it's easy to understand and as long as it's easy for you guys to understand, I think that's important.
I had a question about your balance sheet that you made.
Okay.
So I know you for deferred tax assets, you counted that as like depreciation.
Mm-hmm.
But then for the total non-current assets, you added it. I think you added it again by adding all the rows from net property and equipment, and then you counted deferred tax assets again.
All right. So, all right. We can't. Let's do this. Deferred tax assets, we can't call depreciation. So let me kind of rephrase what I said, or let me clarify my mistake. All right. Depreciation is hardware or things that you own that lose value. Okay. Your deferred tax assessments are actually completely different. Let's just put it that way. Completely different. So I wouldn't say that you should do, because again, when you have your two balance sheets, let's go right here. So operating income, liability. So if we look at Apple deferred revenue, yeah, they're not showing depreciation here either. They're not even showing their deferred tax assets either. We're looking at deferred revenue, deferred tax assets up here. Okay. Let's go back here. Sorry. Yeah, they just have plants and equipment. So your question was gross versus net, correct?
Yeah.
Originally?
Deferred versus depreciation. Because for the balance sheet, you put it as depreciated, which would be as a negative. But then if you're adding the deferred tax assets again, wouldn't you just like take away the math? Like, wouldn't the math not add up properly?
Yeah, but you know what? Now thinking about it, and again, a lot of this, I'm no super accountant or work for tax services, but my thoughts here would be, if we are looking at the balance sheet, depreciation is depreciation of everything you own, depreciation of all of your assets. That includes inventory not being sold. That includes your computers in the office. Okay, so I would simply go through what they have and try to merge what they have dollar for dollar in terms of category. And if you actually have a situation like this where we have property and equipment here, for some reason Yahoo Finance seems to be the only one that is giving us this financial issue with the balance sheet for net. They are providing the, hold on, I hate this damn platform, guys. There we go. So if you look at this, let's just remove, if you're using Yahoo Finance, in theory, you can just, I don't want to tell you to, but if you don't drop this down, you can just use property and plant just like this. So this will show Amazon at 97 billion. Similar to right here, showing Apple at 37 billion. Why is that? Because Amazon has large warehouses. They have a lot more property and equipment with all the machines they have for their warehouse stuff. So that's why this number is so high for them. I wouldn't, and then you look, if you drop this up, you no longer have to worry about the depreciation because Apple doesn't have depreciation here either. Does that kind of make it easier for you to fill this out?
Yeah, I would.
All right. I know that we're almost or at time. I do want to get to those questions. William, what do you got?
Yeah, so I have a question similar to Leslie's about the other current assets row.
Okay.
Yeah, so for Apple, other current assets would be 12,026, right?
Yep.
And let's say for Stitch Fix,
okay,
it's 38,000, right? Yeah, and so for Stitch Fix, it's combined, so it's prepaid expenses and other current assets. So that category is similar to what Peloton has. So what I did was I just added both amounts because I think it'd be better to do that than to just say, oh, prepaid expenses is 38,000, because 38,000 would be prepaid and other non-current assets.
So I would label that category together. I would label that category, instead of other current assets, do prepaid and other current assets. So just that way, if you do want to lump that in together, then I would just change the category to include both.
Okay, that makes sense.
But this is important. Now, everybody has to pay attention to this. I know I got some questions on, converting it to the US dollar. Obviously, that's going to be like super important, but this is also super important. So Apple's balance sheet is in millions. Stitch Fix's balance sheet right here is in thousands. You guys have to make sure that you are treating it the same, whether it's in thousands or millions. Right? Because this means that they have 165 million in cash. Right? Because it's in thousands, so you add 3 zeros. This is in millions. You have to add 6 zeros, which gives you 39 billion, not 39 million. So you guys just got to be very careful in checking your thousands versus millions, okay? Okay, Frida, what's up?
So like I was working on my balance sheet. So I have both of the companies combined, but where do I take out like the cost of the acquisition if it's in debt?
So hold on, you're having combined. Where do you put? So the debt would show up on your balance sheet under liabilities. You would add it right here. So long-term debt, if you're taking out a loan, long-term debt.
Okay, but would it still add up if I put like only half of it into debt? Because I'm splitting like the cost of the acquisition.
Yeah, that's fine. Put it in.
Okay.
Yes, put it in.
All right, thank you.
Serena asked a question, have decimals. I would round everything to the dollar. I would round everything to the nearest dollar.
No, because like it's like 0 point something. Because when I make it from yen to USD, like originally it was in millions. When I make it to yen to USD, it's like point something something. I don't know if that makes sense.
Wait, what's point something something? Which one?
Like for Nintendo, like their whole balance sheet's in yen but in millions.
Okay.
But then when I convert it to US dollars, like it becomes like less than a million. So should I go like it's in like in terms of millions, but it's decimal places?
Oh, got
Or
it.
should I move everything into like 1,000 in terms of thousands?
That's so frustrating. Wow, that's a really interesting question. So in theory, you can just move everything to thousands and add some zeros that way. So Nintendo is decimals compared to Apple because
But it's
Apple's
only like
in millions. Because Apple's too big. Okay. Yeah, I would consider. Yeah, that's frustrating. I would consider switching Apple to thousands then. So this would say 39771,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way at least you can have real numbers because it's probably gonna have something similar, if it was Apple or Amazon with Stitch Fix or Nintendo. Yeah, because that's gonna be a risk with small businesses. I hate to say Nintendo's a small business, but considered to the juggernaut that Apple is in terms of money, that's definitely important. Frida, do we need to take into account interest for debt funding? So technically, you just bought the business. There is no interest yet on it, but I would love to know the interest rate if you're doing debt. If you can find out what the projected interest rate would be. I'm not going to have you guys add interest to the balance sheet yet because theoretically there's no interest because there's no purchase. There's no interest because there's no actual payment due at the time of this merging of the balance sheets. Plus, that would be a whole other piece for you guys to try to have to understand. I'm still just trying to get you guys on the same page of using data to prove your points and then using the merging of the balance sheets to understand the health in assets or liabilities. Let's not even take into account the interest rate on the balance sheet. Let's simply just look at what would be the interest. So maybe on the right side, what would be the loan? You can say if it's 0.08% interest based on research. And then tell me where you got that number from. Or if you're selling bonds, where would the bonds show up in terms of liabilities? And then what's the interest rate for bonds, for those bonds? Right? So I actually saw Netflix bonds 2 weeks ago were worth like 17%. Now Netflix bonds are only 4% return. Right? Because I guess with the economy, the bonds got healthier, right? Because the Federal Reserve is buying debt, which means people and businesses and companies are more interested in owning debt because there's less risk of default because the Fed is involved, right? They're buying bad debt. So if Netflix used to have to give you 14%, but now people are more comfortable owning debt, Well, hell. So Netflix dropped their interest from 14% on bonds to 4%. Crazy. All right, but yeah, let's not put that in the balance sheet. Just give me the percentage somewhere on the presentation or on the outside of the sheet. Frida, another question, or was that it?
So for like the bonds, I searched up like all the bonds that Apple had issued. They have like long-term and short-term bonds. I
Yep.
was thinking of just doing short-term since like the interest is cheaper.
Yep.
Do I also have to take into account like coupon rates?
Let's not. Let's just do short-term or long-term, and then figure out your percentage. Let's not go too deep into coupon rates. I don't want to have to teach that.
Oh, okay. Thank
All
you.
right, we'll get into that another day if we have time after this whole thing is sorted out with doing your presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan, last question, then I'll let you guys go.
Yeah. So this was a question from earlier. You said after class, so I assume that
All right, give it
after
to me now. What's up?
12:15. So you said that merging Samsung and Microsoft is unrealistic, which was based on my whole entire project.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I should like change that subject or keep it.
Did you clear that with me? Samsung and Microsoft?
Yeah, I think you. I remember typing it in the Zoom chat, and you said that would be.
I can't imagine approving Microsoft and Samsung. Those are huge businesses, and I told people not to do. Somebody said like Google and Amazon. Somebody said Amazon and Microsoft, and I was shooting no's left and right with businesses that large. I can't imagine Samsung merging with Microsoft. I'm just trying to find out do you know Samsung's current market cap?
What do you mean by market cap?
Like we've been discussing what the market cap of these businesses are when you look at their stocks. So do you know the estimated market cap of Samsung of all their worth?
Um.
I'll take that as a no. So,
Yeah.
number one, that's a problem because I don't know how you're going to do this if you don't know their market cap off the top of your head. That should have been the first thing you researched. If I go to, Frida, 333 trillion. Is that in U.S. dollars? Korean won. Okay, so 333. So we'll go won to US dollar, 28 billion. Yeah, I was looking at. No, it's only 28 billion. 333. 1, 2, 3. 3. Trillion, millions, billions, trillions. So it's one more. 3 to the US dollars. Here. Is that estimate right, Prasanga? 28 billion? That seems kind of low. I'm looking online. I'm seeing Samsung has assets of 288 billion. I'm wondering if that's in won also. Either way, Microsoft is a $1.2 trillion business, right? Their market cap is 1.2 trillion. If I'm Microsoft, I am not merging with Samsung, unless Samsung is a 900 billion US dollar business. As of now, I don't believe it is. So I don't think you can actually do a merger. If anything, that would actually have to be an acquisition. All right. So Wealth Record has them listed at 326 billion. You're gonna have to do a little bit more research. Looking at their dollar value, you can do Microsoft acquiring Samsung.
Right.
But again, you don't even know their market cap. So we're 2 weeks into this assignment and you are pretty far behind. Prasanga's got me at 800 billion for, you're talking full market cap for their entire stock exchange, for the entire stock worth of Samsung. Is that right, Prasanga? About 800? I was trying to find that, but yeah, so that would mean that's too big. That would not be an acquisition then, because you're talking 1.2 trillion, 800 billion. That would be a Samsung Microsoft merger then. So Ethan, you're gonna have to do that research. We have some differing dollar points. I don't want to take everyone's time to do your work for you that you should have already done. You're gonna have to find out the market cap of Microsoft, find out the market cap of Samsung, and then reach back out to me with if you want to do a merger or an acquisition, then we'll talk separately. All right, Frida, you got your hand up again, or you just never put it down?
I forgot to put it down, sorry.
Okay. All right, if you guys have no questions, I'll post the recording. Mary is here still. No, yep, Mary's here, Nicole's here. Tasneem, I haven't heard from you guys. Are you guys good? If you guys are good, everybody just type a number 5 in the box. Okay? I'm going to work on the shareholder equity piece tonight and see if I can get you guys some better information for tomorrow. Other than that, I will put this recording up within the next 10 minutes. All right, guys. See you mañana, bright and early.